Hi, it's March 22nd, the 26th of Adar. And if there's one thing that's been clear to us over the last couple of days and weeks, is that we've davened like we've never davened before. Because we feel that our lives and the lives of our families, our communities, our people, and of humankind are at great risk. And we're thinking about all the human beings across the globe who are suffering, and we're davening for them. And then we open our siddur, and the words we say aren't very universal. They don't ask for refuah shalema for all of mankind, but shlach refuah shalema l'chol amecha. And the parts, and I've started to say Avinu Malkeinu in my chachrises and minchas, we talk about, and the requests that are so resonant with pandemic meaning, Minam magefa minachal asecha. Please prevent the plague from your people, your homeland, Eretz Yisrael. Shlach refuah shalema l'chol amecha. Kalei dever, dever is a plague. V'cherev, v'rab, v'shvi, v'mashchus, v'yavon, mibnei berisecha. Aseh leman boy v'aishav v'mayim akidosh shemecha. It's a bit of a disconnect, because in our minds and our hearts we realize we're like everyone else and we're facing the same vulnerabilities and the same challenges, and there's no difference between Jew and Spaniard or Jew and Italian, Israeli and Italian. And not only are we sharing vulnerabilities, but our vulnerabilities are codependent. So, for example, if you're in New York listening to this year, your health will be a product of the civic responsibility that the Irish neighbor of yours, or the African American neighbor, or the Italian neighbor, and even in Israel, where we have our own country, my health is a function of whether Arabs in the triangle up north are able to keep their hygiene, and theirs is dependent upon me. So not only are we like other human beings in that we're all facing the same vulnerability, but our vulnerabilities are interconnected. So how do you bridge between these two? How do you daven? How can we daven when our thoughts are so universal and our texts are so national and parochial and Jewish? Don't avoid this question, or else you're going to bifurcate yourself into two different people. The person that sits on the news and watches as the numbers tally across the globe, and then you'll daven and you'll be a different person. And that's not a healthy recipe for authentic and integrated religious experiences in Oved Hashem. So how do you daven? So let me take a few steps back. It's really important. Jews have a dual role. We're meant to build a firm, committed people, walking in the ways of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, obeying His commandments, studying His Word. But we're also meant to be the vanguard of humanity, leading an entire human race with those messages of monotheism, that it all comes from one being, all this diversity, all this dichotomy, not just it's so diverse, but it's different, health and illness, normal situations, abnormal situations. As a sidebar, it's so important to try to keep HaKadosh Baruch Hu present during this pandemic. Some people feel like the numbers are becoming so large and it seems so random and Hashem isn't here. How can you experience this along with HaKadosh Baruch Hu? He's here. Just as He was in Auschwitz. We have to find a way to make Him here, and I'll talk about this a little bit later. But we're also meant to lead humanity in morality, to teach them the type of lifestyle to live and the type of morality that Baruch Hashem, most countries are demonstrating now, while trying to protect compromised people, weak people, elderly people. Now, Avram was very much universalist in his agenda. He prayed for Avimelech when he was ill, even though Avimelech hijacked his wife. He davened and negotiated for the sinners of Stone, hurling these otherwise heretical statements at HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which if you and I would say them, Hashofet Kol Haaretz Le'aseh Mishpat, they'd be heresy. After Avraham, there's a bit of a contraction. And after Avraham, Yitzchak is a little bit less involved in the universalist agenda. Yaakov is a little bit more guarded. He's more internal. He's building the people. We're always involved in these two different programs, building our nation, leading the world, intensely investing in ourselves, leading others. When we leave Mitzrayim in the year 2448, 2,500 years into history, it launches either a 900 period or 1400 year period of universalist agenda for the Jewish people. They're talking about the Jews. They're inspired by the Jews. They hear the stories about the Jews. Vayishma Yisrael. When Shlomo builds the Beis HaMikdash, there's a king in modern-day Lebanon called Hiram who donates cedars to the Beis HaMikdash, not just because logistically there are no cedar trees in Israel proper, it's hard to find, more of a desert climate, but because Hiram wants in. Hiram wants to be part of the Beis HaMikdash. He wants to be affiliated with HaKadosh Baruch Hu through the Jewish people. A little bit after the Beis HaMikdash, Malchus Shiva, Queen Sheba from Ethiopia, visits, praises Shlomo, realizes HaKadosh Baruch Hu through Shlomo, wants to convert the African continent, which had been cursed because it was inhabited by the family of Ham that was cursed. She wants to invert it into a land of bracha and a blessing. Shlomo, when he inaugurates the Beis HaMikdash, in Melachim Beis, Periches says that not only will Jewish prayers course through this route, through this conduit, Shara Shamayim, Beis Elokim, but Games Hanachri, even when a guy davens, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you should hear his tefillos. So the Jews are very universalist during that 900-year period between 2,448 and 3,498. And then, even in the second Beis HaMikdash, even when we leave Eretz Yisrael, we're still very much noted by the world. Melech Koresh, the Persian king, authorizes the beginning and the building of the Beis HaMikdash, not because he wants to hand out a favor to the Jews, but because he realizes to glorify HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he has to build the Beis HaMikdash. When Alexander the Great, who's about to lead this Greek empire to its height, visits Yerushalayim, he's inspired by Shimon HaTzadik, one of the members of Anshe Knesset HaGedolah. And even the battles between the Greeks and the Jews, the Greeks knew there was something in Jerusalem for them to draw from. They wanted to translate the Torah into the Greek, and they also wanted to contaminate and dilute it, and that's what led to all the battles. But the Jews are known to be representatives of Hashem. Others see us that way. We see ourselves that way. And then 1,400 years after this universalist period began, the world goes dark. The Jews are expelled out of Yerushalayim. And now there's a contraction. There's a withdrawal. There's a retreat. We no longer have that universalist role. We're being persecuted. We're being punished. And at that point, it becomes more internal. The Beis HaMedrash and the Beis HaKnesses and the Mikvah and the community and Staka and Maisim Tovim. The Gemara in Bracha says, Miyom Shacharav Beis HaMikdash Ein La Kadosh Baruch Hu Ba'olamo Ela Arba Amo Shel Halacha Bilvad. From the day the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, Hashem then contracted his encounter with us into the Dalet Amos Shel Halacha, into Shulchan Aruch and Chazal and Masara. The implication of that Gemara is before the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, there was a broader fabric of Jewish involvement in leading the world towards a better understanding of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That has been dormant for 2,000 years. That's why a lot of people don't realize it, because so much of our last 2,000 years of Masara is very internal, as it should be. Now we're back in history. We're no longer being persecuted. We're no longer being tortured. We have a role. We have a people. We have a nation. Even if you don't live in Israel, Jews are seen as leaders, finance, science, medicine, culture, social justice. We've led humanity into the modern age. So we always have those two identities. And now during the coronavirus crisis, it's that second identity which is becoming much more prominent. We feel in line with Italians, with Spaniards, what's happening in Spain, what's happening in England, what's happening in America, what's happening in Israel. How can we? And the challenge is, I'll say the challenge I mentioned in the beginning of this year differently. It's the same challenge. We said, how do we daven so nationally for needs that are so broad? The other way to say that challenge is, how do we feel amanivchar? How do we feel chosen when it's hard to feel chosen? We're all facing the same fate. We're all quarantined in the same way. We all know that our health is codependent. How do we feel the amanivchar? How do we feel unique as Jews? So, first of all, it's important that you struggle with that, or else there'll be two yous over this crisis. The you, the identity that listens to the news, and that takes medical care, and then the year that davens, in the same way we daven for the protection of the state of Israel. God forbid that someone should only daven for Jews in this crisis. Obviously, our primary tefillos should be for people closest to us, family members, acquaintances, people of our nation. But if you're going to daven for the Jews to be saved and everyone, first of all, it's grotesque. Second of all, it won't work. It's not the way you daven. You daven for logical. Obviously, HaKadosh Baruch Hu can create whatever miracles he wants, but we need the world to heal. So I want to offer 4 suggestions so that you can daven from these phrases that are very, very parochial and national, but still daven for humanity. Number 1, when you daven, even before getting to davening, we are a mamlechas kohanim v'goy kadosh. We're meant to be role models. We're meant to be priests. Show the world how to follow rules. In Israel, we hope. Everyone's talking about how can our country become like South Korea? How can we take measures? Maybe in a couple of weeks, people will say, how can we be like Israel? If we're careful and we're adherent and we display responsibility and responsible behavior. And if you're listening to this in Johannesburg or in Melbourne, follow the rules as carefully as you can so that your friends and your co-workers will see, oh, this is a Jewish person. And he's leading by example. If a month ago you realize that as a Jew you have to act in a certain manner in the workplace, respectful, clean-tongued, not cursing, not violating sexual boundaries. So now you're not in the workplace, but you're still interacting with your neighbors and you're interacting with your co-workers, long distance, otherwise. Make sure you apply and adhere to the standards, because that's now our role as Mamlechas Kohanim V'Goy Kadosh, to at least be part of the solution to help humanity heal itself in this crisis. Number 1. Number 2. We're so accustomed to davening and to invoking Zechus Avos, Zechus Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Sarif, Rachel, V'Leah, Zechus Avos, Zechus of Am Yisrael, Zechus Akedas Yitzchak. And for 2,000 years, we evoke those Zechuyos for Jewish survival. Hashem should spare us from persecution. Hashem should protect Medinas Yisrael, protect our soldiers, liberate us from the Holocaust. Now, Baruch Hashem, Jewish survival isn't being threatened. We have our nation. We have our security. We're not being persecuted. I was telling my wife over Shabbos, I can't stop thinking about people who have no support system and no one to protect them during the virus. I know that I spend time with my family and I get support and all the family Zooms and we know we're together, we help each other out, we talk and we speak. Think about older people, obviously, single people, think about them. If you know a single person of any age, even a young adult who's single, it's scary. It's frightening. Call them up, give them support. I'm saying about prisoners in jail. Can you imagine the fear that they must go through, knowing that there's really no one caring for them? They're just herded like cattle. See, thank God we live in civilized countries where you don't just leave them to their own devices, but it's not the top of the agenda. I was thinking so much over Shabbos of what the Jews must have felt like during the Black Plague in the 14th century, where they were blamed for it, and they were killed 3,000 at a time. You imagine what we're living through, how many people have died, 10,000, 11,000. It's terrible. It's but on one day, 3,000 people. I heard last night, yesterday, 800 people, or close to 800 people died in Italy. What about 3,000 Jews in Strasbourg, or 3,000 in Barcelona? And then think about the Jews during the cholera outbreak in the 19th century. They were no longer being blamed for it, but they were at the bottom of the food chain. They probably got the leftover masks and the leftover because they were Jews. Now, Baruch Hashem, we have our people, we have our nation. Jews living everywhere are treated with equal dignity and respect. So employ the zechuyos that we have for the sake of humanity. Asay leman boy v'aish v'mayim akidush shemecha, asay leman Avram, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov, asay leman Moshe v'Aaron, and save humanity. Don't you think that Avram would have wanted us to daven that way? Avram daven for Sdom, Avram daven for Avimelech. So we have to daven for Italians and daven for Spaniards and daven for our neighbors and ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu to heal them based on the schus of Am Yisrael. That's what it means to be a leader, that we've worked so hard to become HaKadosh Baruch Hu's chosen and to corroborate Hashem's choosing us. Now we want those zechuyos to save humanity. So number one, be disciplined and adherent because we're the Am HaNivchar. Show the world how Jews behave. Number two, daven based on schusavos for the world to be healed. Number three, daven for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What does it mean to daven for HaKadosh Baruch Hu? HaKadosh Baruch Hu is infinite. Hashemayim u'shmei Hashemayim lo yichalkelucha. Chava mini aretz. Yeah, but his presence in this world is under siege. Because for so many people, it's hard to feel HaKadosh Baruch Hu during this. For some people, it's easy to feel because we're hitting our ceiling. Science and technology and economy can't really solve this, and we realize there's some higher being. But for some people, the world is dark and random and nightmarish, and they don't feel like Hashem's in this world. What will be the state of Malchus Hashem after this plague passes through? And this only heals of the last 20, 30 years where Islamic fundamentalism has convinced everyone that Hashem is angry and vengeful and hateful and bloodthirsty. He's evil. So of course it's consistent. He's evil. So he brought a plague upon us just because he's toying with us. People really care about the Shechina, daven for the Shechina. People get up Chatzos, Alaytik and Chatzos, they daven for the Shechina. We're responsible. We are the custodians of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence in this world. What will the Shechina look like to most people, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, after this plague? How can we change that? Just as a sidebar, it's just so important to bring HaKadosh Baruch Hu into your world, not to check out from the Rebbeinu Shalom during these periods. Find a way to live with him, to daven with him, to understand him, or to have questions and not understand what's happening. But he's not gone. He didn't disappear. Chas v'shalom. But for many people, it's going to feel that way. And number four, and I remember a few hours ago, I davened mincha, I was thinking about this. Ka b'shofar gadol l'cheirisenu. Hashiba shofteinu kivarishona. Ala tzadikim. Destroy the wicked, v'lam alshinim. Es tzemach David avdecha. Vili shleim. He feels about Mashiach, about what's my vision of Mashiach? What am I davening for? That one day we'll all gather in Yerushalayim. All the billions of people, they'll realize that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Sakin Olam and Malchus Shakai, and Diva Mim Nesaf, Uam Lake Avram. And they'll all be healed. As when Mashiach comes, there will be no longer any sickness or any illness. As much as we'll try through human devices with HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Siyata D'Shmaya and help and guidance to bring health, we're not going to create a perfect world, a perfect well-being. Sometimes the world will be more topsy-turvy, sometimes it'll be less topsy-turvy. When Mashiach comes and we daven for Mashiach, we're not just davening for Jewish triumph, but for all the people of the world to be spiritually and medically healed. Our world is broken. It's broken medically, and it's obviously broken spiritually. And we'll try our best to inspect and to understand and to probe and to come up with both spirituals and medical solutions. But as much as we can, try to perfect this world. We're waiting for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to perfect it for us. So what better time to say to Ka b'shofar gadol and imagine people gathering in Yerushalayim healed? To say Hashiva Shofteinu Kivarishon and imagine Malchus Beis David radiating welfare and prosperity to the world, or Tzemach David Avdecha, or Ve'ala Tzadikim, the gathering of the Tzadikim, Nasid Lavo. Please, please don't avoid this challenge. If you avoid this challenge, I think your experience is going to be a little more hollow. It's a really important challenge. We're living the pandemic as universalists. We're davening with language that was, of course, written by Anshe Knesset Gadol. We don't change, and it was written in the context of Yeshuas Yisrael. But a real Oved Hashem realizes that Yeshuas Yisrael is Yeshuas Basar Adam. And here's a, I want to say good opportunity, but such an important opportunity to fuse the two and mold the two. Mitzvah Hashem, I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.